Welcome to Mysterious Universe, Season 34, Episode 10. Coming up on the show, we've got phantom calls from the bed, transgenic employment opportunities, and the Universal Intelligence Consortium. I'm your host, Benjamin Grundy. Joining me is Aaron Wright.
I know you didn't want to do that one, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Telephone calls from the bed.
From the bed, yeah. Of course, a play on telephone calls from the dead.
That got a re-release, the famous Scott Rogo book.
Did it?
A couple of weeks ago, yeah. They reissued it again. I was waiting for you to do it on the show for the 8th time.
Oh, well, too bad because I'm doing it on the show again today.
No, you're not.
No, I've got some... well, listen to me. I've got some stories from it that actually tie in with some really intriguing phenomena connected to voices, which I'm going to be going to later on in the show. Because I've had a PDF copy of Telephone Calls from the Dead for ages.
Right.
And you're right. I mean, I've covered it numerous times on the show. But for whatever reason, it's only recently that I realized just how much D. Scott Rogo was really going pretty hardcore on the whole this is all PK phenomena. And remember how we did that show about Rogo and his other book? And it was like, with the Haunted Universe, it's all PK.
Everything's in the mind.
This book is too. And I never really realized it. I'm like, oh, hang on a second. But it's absolutely not. So we're going to be talking about that, where people have had what appear to be UFO encounters. And I like it when there's a collision between the categories of paranormal stuff. So we're going to be talking about this weird voice phenomena that doesn't just show up with phone calls, but also in haunted houses, UFO experiences, alien encounters, like all this kind of weird stuff kind of meshes together with this auditory phenomena, which is rather rare, but if you dig deep enough, you find that it kind of hits a lot of different areas of the paranormal.
Okay, not what I was expecting. I thought it was going to be like the porno version of a D. Scott Rogo book. It's like your dead girlfriend calls you for phone sex. I thought it was going to be something like that, but no, okay. I'm going to be going
Maybe, you never know.
The bread and butter alien abduction phenomenon, new book by Paul Meehan.
Oh, I saw this. I was going to do this. I'm glad that you did it.
It's pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's pretty good. He covers all the usual cases, the well-known cases, the ones in between. But I like it because he's not afraid to go into the periphery. And he spends a lot of time talking about this phenomena that's on the edges of the UFO abduction phenomenon.
You mean like the high strangeness stuff?
Even the periphery of the high strangeness.
Really?
For example, he's got a chapter on bogus job interviews, the fake job interviews.
Oh, I love that. The classic how, you're lured to a weird and awkward job interview, and then all of a sudden you have like this weird screen memory that, hang on a second, that wasn't a job interview.
Yeah, there's a handful of cases, probably about a dozen of them over the years, where
Redfern's dug up a couple of those.
Yeah, there's quite a few where it's almost always an abductee who has already had an experience. And it either precedes or, comes years after their remembered alien abduction experience.
Yes.
Where they get this job opportunity out of nowhere. And the location is always some out of the way, like abandoned factory. And when they go in there, the typical scenario is there's a single desk, one chair, and some really stiff looking woman or man sitting behind the desk ready to take them for the job interview. And it's everything about it is uncanny valley. Everything about it is just wrong.
Well, it's almost like you're not necessarily being interviewed by the men in black, but it's that same awkwardness masquerading as like knowing what they think a human would behave like.
Yeah, it's like
they're not.
There's one famous example, which I'll tell you later, where the woman, she arrives for the interview and it's just this bare warehouse with the desk. And she asks this strange woman behind the desk, oh, I need to use the bathroom. Where's the bathroom? And this woman just stands up and runs away because it's like
she doesn't know what a bathroom is.
She's not pre-programmed to know the answer to that question. Yeah. So she just has to bail on the scenario. And this poor woman is just standing there. And then usually these stories end with them like waking up, walking home. Like they suddenly come to and they're nearly at home. They have this hazy recollection of something going awry at the job interview.
You are right, though. I mean, that stuff really is on the extreme periphery of this kind of stuff. But I wonder, because there are enough cases that seem to be independent of each other. It's not like, some people are picking up with the story that they've heard and running with it. They do appear to be independently researched. It makes me think, did ETs just try this at one point where they're like, hey, look, plucking people out of cars in the middle of the night is not really working for us anymore, so let's get them in for fake interviews?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I think it was David Jacobs who suggested these were like rogue hybrids. I think he called them rogue hybrids, where they were acting outside of the confines of the program, right? They were just doing things on their own and and trying to lure people in.
They can't even put IKEA furniture together.
What's amazing about this is the author, Paul Meehan, I wasn't expecting this at all. He's got his own bogus job interview experience. It happened in New York. Yeah, so I'm going to be sharing that later on in the episode. So looking forward to getting into it. Yeah, let's get into it. So he begins, he begins with I don't know why these guys, they write these books about aliens and UFOs. They always tell us everything we already know.
Oh, it seems like there's this, for the moment, this kind of like, they're all very elementary books at the start. Like, oh, you have to cue someone up with, what's going on with the phenomenon. Most people reading UFO books, I'm sorry, they're already across that kind of stuff.
Is it the publishers that tell them
Probably.
we have to go all the way back to Kenneth Arnold in 1947? It's like, we know this stuff. You don't need to write this in the opening chapter of your book. But, he does this and he goes through as I said, all the famous cases, all Roswell, 1947,
Betty and
Barney Hill, Travis Walton. Or if you know nothing about abductions, alien abductions phenomena.
Oh, it's compelling.
So this is a great place to start. But in the preface, he talks about his own experience. I think he was in Brooklyn at the time. This was back in 1975. He was on a ground floor apartment on University Avenue. Actually, he was in Northwest Bronx. He said, one afternoon I heard people yelling outside, and he said he ran outside to investigate. And he said as he was coming down the stairs, the hair on his arms started to raise.
Like that static electricity effect.
Yeah, and he had this feeling that, like during a thunderstorm where there's electricity in the air.
Mm.
Anyway, he got outside and there were all these people on the street, and he asked someone, what's going on? What is going on? What's everyone yelling at? And he was told that a UFO had been seen kind of slowly floating away over the Jerome Park Reservoir, which was just a few blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
And it was described as football-shaped, had a row of bright lights and red light in the middle. And there were windows with beings peering out at everyone down below in the Bronx.
Could anyone see what these beings look like, or are they just vague shapes?
It's just vague shapes peering out. They said they looked like it looked like the monorail ride at the World's Fair.
Mm-hmm.
So he said obviously this event sparked his interest, even though he didn't see anything that day. He heard plenty of people report it. But anyway, a few years later, he was a student studying cinema. He was at the Hunter College in Manhattan. And one day he struck up a conversation with a fellow student, and somehow UFOs just came into the conversation. And he said this girl, she kind of looked at him weirdly as if, I don't know if I should be sharing this with you. But she eventually told him this story of a time she worked at a department store in the city, and a man who was heavily involved in the New York theatrical scene was working with her. And one day while they were working together, he asked her, do you want to see something? And he kind of pulled up his shirt and he showed her this bruise. It was like a purplish blue bruise about an inch wide, and it extended underneath his entire armpit. Then there was an identical mark, almost like a tattoo, on the other side going up to the armpit. They looked like kind of stretch marks, but they were quite dark. And he told her this story. He claimed he was driving at night somewhere in the Northeast, upstate New York. He claimed he was near a nuclear power plant, possibly the Indian Point nuclear facility in Westchester.
But that's had, I think, UFO activity around it on numerous occasions.
Well, that's why he includes the detail, I presume. There's plenty of stories of UFO sightings associated with nuclear facilities.
But particularly that one.
Yeah, okay. So eventually he saw a luminous orb overhead. You know how the story goes.
Yes, yeah.
His engine shuts down, loses consciousness. He wakes up, the craft's gone, the car starts running again. He's got no memory of what happened. He's missing like 2 hours. And so the tale...
Bruises, pain?
Well, eventually he had these bruises under his arms. Yeah, going up his armpits.
But obviously not something he initially realized.
What do you mean?
Like it wasn't something and he kind of came out of it and was like, hang on a second.
I'm not sure. We don't have the details because, I mean, he noticed that these details aligned with all the abduction, it aligns with the abduction pattern. But he managed to get the phone number of this guy. He wanted to follow up and get more details on the story, but he called and called and called this number. He could never get through to the guy. Then he lost contact with the girl. He stopped working at that store, so he couldn't follow up. But he says Since hearing that and since having that almost sighting of a UFO, he's been absolutely fascinated with the abduction phenomenon because it's so tied into the topic of UFOs and UAPs. And this is why I'm always critical of what we hear in the mainstream press about UAPs, the breakthroughs of the UAPs, is they're missing such a huge piece of the puzzle. It's like you're just talking about the vehicles. Who cares about the vehicles? Who's in the vehicles?
Well, that's right, because the vehicles...
What are they doing to us?
Well, they just cycle through. It's like the vehicles slightly morph and move with the culture and kind of just stay just ahead of whatever our current technology is. It's kind of weird. It's like you go all the way back to the Scandinavian rockets, for example. It's like rocket technology was just kind of taking off. Dirigibles, that was kind of, we go back even further, and then a little bit later, a decade or two later, that starts coming around. It always just stays on the leading edge of technology. And so really recently, these UAPs and drone-like craft are kind of consistent with what we might possess in the next 20 to 30 years. Probably not the ability to have the inertial dampening and, turning on a dime, but pretty close. Like it just kind of precedes what we have. So it's like, it's nothing new.
Well, he kind of does a great job of splicing up over the years this timeline of activity, like what you're describing here with the appearance of their vehicles. He creates these categories where you can clearly see the activity changing. So obviously we've got the contactees. So we've got people like Adamski.
Menja.
Yeah, Menja, Angelucci. What's the other guy?
Ingrid Cold.
Well, he's one of the aliens.
Well, he's the aliens, but who was the guy that he contacted? It was...
I can't remember. You got Daniel Fry. You've got all these contactees from the 1950s, and we've done plenty of shows about them. But then it kind of, at the same time as you were having these contactees, and almost as that was fizzling out, you had another paradigm emerge, which he called the Occupants. And these stories well. We've done, infinity of these cases.
What kind of cases, though?
So the Occupants, he uses this term for a humanoid sightings along with a craft. So you're seeing a craft and then a bunch of humanoids get out. And these are the sightings that started to appear in the 1950s. Usually little diminutive guys wearing suits.
Like the French Wave, like 1954.
Precisely. Most of these occurred in the 50s in France. These are strange entities wearing suits, like big bubbled astronaut helmets.
Yeah, fishbowl helmets.
Breathing apparatuses. And often they would be doing things that you would expect an astronaut to do.
Digging for soil samples.
Taking soil samples.
Water.
There's stories of them like stealing a chicken. But they would never interact with eyewitnesses. If there was any interaction at all, it would be the being using some device or the craft itself paralyzing the eyewitness.
With a light beam.
And that would be the end of it. There was no telepathic communication. There was certainly no abductions, although there's probably a few, but they were rare.
There was attempted ones. It was a story of, I can't remember if it was a French or Italian case of a woman that was picking flowers in a field, and three diminutive little freaks essentially tried to drag her into a kind of a diamond-shaped craft.
Yeah.
Like that was around that time period. But outside of that, there weren't any significant cases.
And people would see strange vehicles like these guys.
Yeah.
Guys riding weird motorcycles.
That was the French one, wasn't it?
There's a case from Spain in 1957 with these weird humanoids holding what look like lamps and then disappearing off the roof of a house. Weird stuff like that. This is one from Brazil. So this was 1953. Hospital worker Mauricio Ramos Bessa driving home on a rural road. He sees this luminous oval-shaped craft hovering in front of his vehicle. He watches as two dwarfish, so they said 4.5 feet tall, these little humanoids dressed in the shiny grey clothing.
So this is consistent with the case that I covered on the previous Plus episode of these, and that was in 1969, but it really did fit into kind of this time period of it being these diminutive creatures wearing these grey, dull metal spacesuits.
Yeah, they get out and you can see they've got the bubble helmets.
Yeah.
One of them carried a cylinder which was used to scoop soil from the road. And he got a headache, he felt sick. They didn't interact with him. They just got back in the craft and flew away. And then he felt sick for a couple of days, but then he was fine. And that's like the end of the encounter. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these all over the world. This is where the term little green men came from. It's from this period of these occupant sightings that started in France, spread across Europe, and eventually they were seen all over the world. So it's really interesting that this was parallel with the contactee period The contactee period is like cheap sci-fi, and we've always speculated on the show what was really behind that. Was it actually aliens? Because the whole thing just smells like some kind
like
of
a psyop
psychological operation. Seeding these ideas into these contacts that, they could really have communism in space. Everyone could be free and have a post-scarcity society. All you had to do was share everything and then save the planet.
And disable your nuclear weapons program.
Disable your nuclear weapons. That's right. He goes through a bunch of those. He talks about this parallel occupants. He calls it the occupants. But then this started to change. The occupant sightings were from the mid-1950s to the mid-1970s, and they were replaced by abductions. So from the 1970s onwards, those classic, glass bubble helmet little astronaut guys, that
disappeared.
Stopped happening.
Yeah, there was a researcher, and I can't recall his name. I know it was a he. I can't recall his name, but I wanted to give him credit for it. But there was a researcher that looked into this period, this intermittent period actually, of between I know what the term was. I just called them humanoids. But there was this period of where it was the collectors. And the collectors were these guys. So they would collect soil samples, water, flowers, you're right, occasionally animals. Sometimes they would collect really obscure things, like they go into people's homes and take pegs. Which is strange, right? And people would come in and find them rifling through their laundry and stealing things. And even though actually that case I did as well. Remember when the guy was abducted, he had his fishing bundle with him. They laid it all out and stole the duplicate of everything that was in his fishing bundle. So it's all around that period, for whatever reason, it's like they were collecting stuff to maybe understand humanity. I don't know why.
Well, Paul, the author of the book, Paul Meehan, he's got an interesting take on this. He questions whether the whole occupants phenomenon, this 20-year period of what you just described, is essentially fake. It's staged. They're all staged events. And his idea is that it has nothing to do with collecting samples, collecting soil samples, biological samples. Because, the obvious question is, if you wanted to collect a sample of Earth substrate, why would you do it in a populated area?
Well, for the most part,
why can't they do it in the middle of nowhere where no one has any chance of seeing them?
But for the most part, a lot of those cases were on, farmlands and homesteads. So it's not like they landed in the middle of a French road somewhere. They were coming down at more isolated locations, and maybe that's part of it, right? You can't collect. You want to get human impact, perhaps.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. They want to get samples where there's human civilization because you might be measuring what effect human civilization has on the environment.
Well, the whole point is, right, if they may very well have been collecting samples from isolated locations and we wouldn't know about it because no one saw it.
Exactly, yeah, that's a bit of a fallacy. But he says in many cases they wore what appeared to be spacesuits and helmets, similar to what earthly space explorers wore. Witness George Obarski claimed that the humanoids he observed reminded him of the Apollo astronauts taking rock samples on the moon.
Yeah.
And he said this is precisely the notion that the event was meant to convey. So what Meehan's getting at is that they're trying to create this idea of the friendly spacemen just observing and taking samples. And if you read between the lines, I think what he's trying to say is that this was essentially creating a psychological basis for that idea, because the truth of what was actually going on, the truth of what their motives were, was far darker. Because the idea of the friendly spaceman coming to get samples and just observe is very benign. We don't have to worry about that at all.
Yeah, but in saying that, so many of those cases really do fly in the face of that argument. So many of the cases were terrified farmers, injured animals, injured people, as you pointed out earlier, Ben, being struck by some type of paralysis weapons. Yeah. I don't necessarily think, and maybe overall, maybe that was the plan, but I'm not entirely sure of that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you're those cases are your specialty.
I know those cases. So many of them back to front. Yeah.
Well, the other thing he introduces is one of the other tropes of the phenomenon where you're driving down an empty road at night and then it's bang, flying saucer. Boom, there's a big light around the corner. And this is suggested as well that this is a psychological impact. It's done that way on purpose. Many witnesses report suddenly encountering UFOs as they rounded a bend in the road. It's kind of like a UFO jump scare.
Yeah.
Right? And even J. Allen Hynek from the Blue Book study, I think it was, he commented on this. He said, in case after case, reports contain the phrase, after rounding a bend in the road.
Yeah.
It's like they're sitting there waiting like this haunted house jump scare, which again adds to his argument that this is like a psychological operation.
Yeah, maybe.
More than anything else.
Maybe. And I think he might be onto something there, and perhaps he hasn't included it because it doesn't really fit into the scope of this particular book. But that's also consistent with the classic haunted roads, especially through the UK and through Britain, of where people will come around a corner and they're like the real classic trope is that there's a lady in white standing in the middle of the road.
Right.
And it's always as you come around a corner. But then, of course, then you get the big cats, you drive around a corner and suddenly a big cat will come into the road. But then you go to the US and you even talk about more recent cases like the Beast of Bray Road. Not all, but in many of those cases as well, you have kind of the witness saying, oh, I just came around a bend or I came around a turn and there was a wolf man standing on the road. It's like the phenomena itself is trying to be seen. It's trying to be noticed. And one thing about the UFO stuff, and this is from cases that have come from Australia, but I've also heard it as well from the US, is that many people that have those experiences, right, where you're right, you come around a corner and there's some type of craft, they know it before they get around because a lot of people notice that their headlights start to bend.
Oh, right.
And light, as you know, only travels in a straight line. Like it's not, and people now with cars with, high beam assist and everything, all your lights change and move. But that's a very modern thing. We're talking about cases from, the 70s, the 80s, maybe even earlier. Literally, people would see the light bend. And bend towards
Hurl around,
and then move towards the craft, which, of course, they come around the corner and they're on top of it.
That's weird.
Yeah. And some of those cases, which I was looking into it, but I haven't been able to find many of them. But there are cases of where not only do people come around, but I mentioned it to you, Ben, they come around the corner, they find a UFO just plonked in the road and it's unattended. And because human beings are curious, what do? Well, they get up and they start wandering through the UFO and they describe and I almost feel like you're coming to collect, in that particular case I mentioned, they were collecting samples. But I'm like, if you land on a planet, are you going to leave the keys in the ignition?
Yeah. So I guess with all the stories we've covered apart from this book, we could concede, I think, that there's more to these cases, these occupant cases and these sudden encounters on the road late at night. There's more to them than just, I'm getting a sample or I need to observe or let's see what this human being is doing. There's a psychological aspect to it as well.
Definitely.
And this is exactly what Meehan's getting at. He says both the occupant cases and the vehicle encounters appear to have been designed to announce the alien presence in a roundabout way. He says by seeding the idea into humanity's collective consciousness via tabloid articles, accounts in UFO books, science fiction movies, and other media. He says at the same time, these staged events obscured close encounters that the UFO intelligences took great pains to keep secret, and that was the alien abductions.
So is that suggesting, because when people say Psyops, immediately a lot of people, and rightly so, think of a government Psyop or some type of, human-induced Psyop. But is the suggestion here is that there was some Psyop being conducted by a non-human species and the humans were trying to keep it covered up because they didn't know what was going on?
I don't think he's talking about a human cover-up at all. I think he's talking about the psychology of whatever intelligence is behind the phenomenon. They're trying to establish a base concept of what's going on, which obscures the genuine activity, which he is arguing is really the alien abductions. It's kind of what I say about UFOs all the time. When, you see US Congress talking about UAPs. It's all superfluous.
But correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but does it feel like abductions have stopped?
Well, we're not getting as many reports, that's for sure.
Well, I wouldn't even say many. I don't think, in the past few years, we've really heard of a really credible abduction.
You get some coming in, like we have covered some over the years. I would say dozens. But it's not like the years when you had people like John Mack, even Bud Hopkins. I mean, David Jacobs is still around, but he's really old now. Especially Meehan points out that once not Jacobs, but once John Mack passed away in that car accident in London and Bud Hopkins died a few years later, the serious research really died off because Mack was the one that was trying to get the scientists together. He was trying to get seminars with, colleagues from other...
Or was Mack Harvard?
Yeah, Mack was from Harvard. Yeah. And he faced a lot of, they tried to censor him and they tried to attack his tenure. But
so does that mean that he's practically indestructible though if he's got tenure? So that's why he could run with it?
I think they let him keep his tenure. He was still in good standing, but obviously his reputation was massively damaged. Like they had a full review of his position at the university. Like it took 14 months, I think, to do this full review of everything he was doing.
Look, and I know that obviously accidents happen and terrible things happened every day. It's really dreadful, but still a bit suspicious.
I don't know anything about the circumstances of his accident, but the fact remains that there wasn't really anyone to take on the torch. Well, there wasn't enough people to take up the torch that had a foot in the academic world.
Correct. Well, I was going to say, because Yvonne Smith, who is a great researcher, like she picked up after Bud Hopkins, and she's actually quite extraordinary in the stuff that she's done and the experiences she's had. But you're right. It's like, I don't think these researchers were kind of embedded enough into, mainstream academia to bring maybe an air of legitimacy to it, so it's recognized more. Unfortunately, if you're not coming from that space, which is very rare anyway, people kind of dismiss you as being, oh, you're into that crackpot stuff.
Well, I think what's gone are the days of the researcher collating all the reports of people that are coming to him because he's the main outlet. Those days are gone. Now, if someone's had an experience,
they put it online.
They share it online.
Which in some ways as well makes it more difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff. Because if you're a researcher and you've got people writing you letters and contacting you, I think on some level there's a element of, I don't know, even on a letter, it's like some humanity comes through. You can read people, right? When it's on the internet, it's just posted to some random forum. I don't know. It doesn't feel anywhere near as genuine.
Well, going back to that time period, so from the mid-1970s, this is when the abduction phenomenon obviously started to take over. Humans were reportedly being taken inside UFOs against their will and subjected to the enigmatic medical procedures. So gone were the little guys with the diving suits taking the soil samples. That was gone, completely replaced by the greys. And it was this shift in the perception of events, that it really makes this time period interesting. And I don't want to go over the UFO abduction thing for the millionth time. Like, we don't need to talk about the pattern there or those stories. I think this book is an excellent way to get an understanding of what's been going on, but I also recommend Steve Aspen's Out of Time, which was the intergenerational abduction program explored. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah.
And Aspen is an experiencer himself, so he's had his own strange abduction scenarios to report. So definitely check out that. I'll link to that in the show notes.
We did an episode on that, didn't we?
Yeah.
I'll find the episode and put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah, that was a really good episode. So for this book, for Paul's book, I wanted to look at those fringe areas like I mentioned earlier. So as abduction research progressed into the 2000s, he said, investigators began to examine reports of the Transgenics. So this is a term Bud Hopkins came up with. He coined this for hybrids, basically. Human-looking beings. There was something always a little bit off about them. They didn't quite fit in, but they could pass as human.
Transgenic is a term that we use in medical research, so it makes sense that if they're talking about the hybrids.
Right. They made these brief forays into human society as part of a long-term infiltration program, he writes. So recent reports, he says, seem to indicate that their presence is becoming more permanent, and he quotes David Jacobs, who talks about abductees training these transgenic beings, filling them in on how to live in society, like taking them to IKEA, showing them what furniture is, how to sit on it.
Yeah, it's that classic story of where an abductee who was helping these beings turned up at their apartment and all the furniture was piled up in a corner because they didn't understand. Like, this is how foreign it is to them. They didn't understand what furniture was.
And I remember one of the stories, an abductee went to the hybrid's apartment and they just had a steak sitting in the pan. Like,
I don't recall
an uncooked steak, and it had been there for like a week because they didn't realize that once you put it in the pan, you got to cook it. It's just this rotten piece of meat. So the other side of that is these bogus job interviews. So I want to talk about this. They use the promise of employment to lure unsuspecting victims into situations that lead to abductions or other events. The non-interviews for these non-jobs are conducted in hastily assembled office environments that seem more like minimalist movie sets than real-world workspaces. They're usually, as I said at the start, they're in out-of-the-way places, the middle of nowhere. And there's never any employment at the end of it. It's always some bogus thing. And so he talks about this in the context of Men in Black. That's included in this. I thought it was interesting he included the bogus social workers, the phantom social workers.
Right, which John Keel investigated heavily. And when was that? Was that the UK or was that,
there was some
Massachusetts
cases
as well?
In the 80s in the UK and I think later in the 90s as well, where essentially a social worker with all the credentials would turn up and try and take your kids, basically. And, it's always been up for debate what was actually going on there. I think it's more likely that it was some kind of pedophile ring rather than extraterrestrial adjacent.
You're right. But also, really, a pedophile ring would get women to dress up as social workers? I know that people facilitate crime, but I think that's even too outrageous. I don't know what it is. I think that actually fits more into just the confusion that the phenomena wants to create. Because it's obscure, it's weird, and people go, what the hell was that? It's designed to disrupt us psychologically. It's like the phantom photographers.
Yeah, there's something more going on. But again, this idea of these infiltrations in society, these beings walking amongst us that pass as humans, it's something that's been there from the start. You can go all the way back to the Contactees. And that was essentially what people like Adamski were describing. Adamski had a story from 1953 where he was just in some hotel room in Los Angeles and two men in dark suits approach him, very Men in Black. One guy was over 6 feet tall, wavy black hair, looked like he was in his early 30s. The other guy was shorter, younger, grey-blue eyes. And they invite him on a drive to the desert. They're like, it's like a weird proposition, drive with us to the middle of the desert. But Adamski, again, it's like they have some kind of mental influence over the eyewitness. Yeah. He just jumps in the car and out he goes. They tell them their names are Furcon and Ramu, and they're from Mars and Saturn. They inform him that they're contact men who had lived and worked on Earth in secret for years. The Martian and the Saturnian drove Adamski to a secluded location where he claims he boarded a saucer and flew to the mothership in outer space.
See, that's silly though in itself, isn't it? Because, maybe if they're extra dimensional or something, but we know obviously that certainly, maybe Mars, there's a possibility for a humanoid to habitate it, but Saturn, it's a gas giant.
Yeah, well, this is the thing with the contactee period, without going into it in too much detail, is it's obviously sounds like some D-grade sci-fi movie.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean there wasn't genuine activity going on. The real question is, who were these people and where were they actually from? What was their mission?
This is what I'm going to talk about, though, in the Plus extension, because this goes further to what we've been talking about recently, where it's like all aspects of this phenomena, whether it's a ghostly experience, a cryptozoological experience, or a UFO experience, it seems to have this element of, could that be fake? Is that real? Could that be fake? It's like real phenomena occurs, but it's littered with absurdities that makes it kind of, everything gets tarred with the same falsity brush.
Exactly. It has to be within the framework of silliness for it to function.
Yeah.
But there are more convincing stories. So one of the famous ones over the years, and it's been a while since we've mentioned this, that's Sir Peter Horsley on the screen there. So this guy was a celebrated, distinguished British aviator. He was an air marshal. He was the deputy commander-in-chief of the RAF Strike Command. He was an equerry in the British royal family. And he spoke about this event in 1954. You'll remember this because Nick Redfern's written about this a bunch of times. It became public in his 1997 memoirs that he published called Sounds from Another Room. But he had been involved in UFO investigations because of his position in the RAF for years.
Well, of course, the Air Force is dealing with stuff that's in the sky.
Yeah, as in the documents would come in, he'd see the documents and he was interested. And then one day he received a phone call from an associate, General Martin. General Martin was apparently, in the British circles of power, and he believed in ETs. He thought that the UFOs were extraterrestrials. And he suggested that Sir Peter meet with an acquaintance of the general who was knowledgeable about ETs and this UFO phenomenon. And so a meeting is arranged. Sir Peter gets this address at some flat in London, and it's kind of like the whole bogus job interview.
Yeah.
Like he goes to this flat, and he's greeted by this woman named Mrs. Markham, who just quickly ushers him into this really dimly lit drawing room. And there's just a desk with a man sitting there, or not a desk, like a couple of chairs. A man named Mr. Janus is there. Remember this story, Mr. Janus? So Janus, this guy, he's like 45 years old, thinning grey hair. He's neatly dressed, suit and tie. And
isn't that Janus? Which is
Janus, Janus.
But isn't that like a godly figure? Something? Is it? What's the?
Yeah. I guess it's like a Roman god or something.
Yeah, something like that. Which is what adds to the like. Why would you use that term?
And what was weird about this guy is after the interview, Horsley said he just couldn't remember the guy's face. Like everything else you could recall in perfect detail, but he tries to remember the guy's face and it's just blank.
A blur.
It's a blur. Over the next 2 hours, this mysterious stranger starts discussing UFOs with Horsley, along with very mystical, occult, spiritual information. Janus explains that the Earth was being monitored by an ET race called the Observers, who had the planet under surveillance. The aliens hailed from another solar system and were far more technologically advanced than Earth. Earth was like a backwater with half-civilized beasts, i.e. humans, inhabiting it. And from time to time, this guy told him the observers came among us and made contact with selected individuals. They had concentrated their efforts in open societies like the US and other Western democracies because in the, dictatorship states of the communists and other places, it was more difficult to do that. That's why a lot of the contacts were in the West. According to Janus, the observers were able to surgically alter their bodies so that they could survive in Earth's environment. They relied on their psychic powers and telepathy and their ability to manipulate different dimensions to protect themselves while they were on these missions on Earth. So this guy, Janus, there was a few moments where there was like telepathic exchange of information going on. And this guy was basically alluding that he was one of them.
Yeah.
He was one of these observers.
Hence why he wasn't able to recall his face later on.
Yeah, and he felt Horsley said he felt shaken after this interview. And what was interesting is this, remember, this is the 1950s. And this guy, Janus, Mr. Janus, he tells Horsley that, look, your future is going to be full of this advanced technology. You're going to have ubiquitous rockets going up, and this is going to create instantaneous communication across the entire world. And he talks about
stuffing everything up.
Well, he talks about everything shrinking. So all the technology you have now, it's going to shrink down and it's going to be very powerful and you're going to be able to talk to people everywhere all the time. And what's interesting is you compare this to the Contactees stuff, which was like, you're going to have socialism in space and it's going to be amazing. This guy, Janus, he was more on the money because what he described actually took place. We did have this explosion in technology. We do have the ability to talk across the world instantaneously. We do have rockets sending up satellites all the time to create this communication. So out of all the crazy beings that claimed they were from like outer space, he was one of the few ones that was actually right.
The only thing is, it makes me wonder, is he just some guy who is like a futurist? Like he was just, he just happened to get it right. Like he was the one that got it right.
Well, then you get into this question of, well, is it another psyop? Are they trying to seed this idea that human beings are being watched? But why? For what purpose? But as the interview ended, Janus expressed a desire to meet personally with Prince Philip, and because he knew that Horsley was connected to the royal family. And that's why he had to log this. Like this had to go into an official file.
Oh, because so this is why it is actually acknowledged.
Yeah, because anytime someone's like, mentions the royal family, apparently this has to be logged, noted. In an odd postscript, Horsley made several phone calls to this flat, to Mrs. Markham's flat, to set up another meeting, but all the calls went unanswered. And he tried to contact General Martin, and the general was suddenly like really evasive about it. It was like, don't talk to me about this.
Yeah, you're right. It does have these characteristics of these false job interviews.
Yeah.
But it's like, they've switched it up to try something new with him.
Well, Horsley, this is all before the interviews because this is the 1950s. And Horsley got so frustrated he couldn't get through to this guy again. He went straight back to the apartment. He just caught a taxi there and thought, I'm just going to knock on the door. And he gets there and the whole building's completely abandoned.
It's like a time slip.
It's nothing there at all.
It's like these weird time slip cases. Remember that one that we were talking about recently where a guy was trying to evade people that were, clearly criminals are going to attack him. He takes refuge in this place. He wants to go back and thank them. And when he goes back, it's completely empty.
Mm.
It's the same kind of, do you see how it starts fitting with other elements of the phenomenon?
Oh, yeah. Well, another one from a little bit later involves, another celebrated flying guy, another aviator. This is the astronaut, Gordon Cooper, Gordo as he went by.
Bring him up. It's not up on the...
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Military test pilot. Astronaut. He was one of the original 7 Mercury astronauts on the Mercury and Gemini programs.
Did he claim in his later years that he'd had some type of contact in space?
Yeah, he had a bunch of UFO-related stories. He was always interested in the topic.
Mm.
But he wrote this autobiography in 2000. It was called Leap of Faith. I'll link to it in the show notes. But after he left NASA, he worked for Disney, and he was in their Imagineering department, where they try and look at future technologies they can apply to the parks. And in 1978, he started to get these random phone calls from someone he didn't know who wanted to set up a business meeting. And he eventually consented. It was this woman. Her name was Valerie Ransone. She was in her late 20s, and Cooper described her as this really beautiful young woman, very intelligent. And she claimed to have worked for the White House during the Gerald Ford administration. She was involved in developing national energy conservation, some program involved with that. And she had contacted Cooper because she was assembling a research and development team consisting of technical people with unusual backgrounds. This private group would be tasked with developing novel technologies that were developed from alien sources.
Mm.
And I mean...
like reverse engineered?
Not like spinning flying saucers.
No.
Sources of alien technology.
Mm.
In subsequent meetings, she explained that she had a missing time experience when she was 17, during which she claimed that she had been contacted by a group of ETs calling themselves the Universal Intelligence Consortium. The ETs wanted to use her as a telepathic conduit for communicating technological and cultural data that would assist in the spiritual and material transformation of humankind. Is this ringing a bell?
Yeah.
This is like the stuff that Diana Pasulka looks into now, with these guys that claim they're in touch mentally with aliens and they're helping get this technology.
Even Linda Moulton Howe has got alleged military sources that have claimed something that's similar.
She further explained that she had been associated with Dr. Puharich, who was working at the Institute of Noetic Sciences at the time in New York.
He's connected with remote viewing too, isn't he?
Yeah, Puharich, involved with a lot of stuff. He was involved with Geller
and
channeling ETs and all sorts of crazy shit.
Mm.
Puharich had been involved with clairvoyance, psychokinesis, and Uri Geller as well. And remember, Geller claimed to be in contact mentally with ETs.
Well, didn't Geller get blasted by some ET ray when he was a kid?
Yeah, according to his memoirs. So during one of their meetings at a restaurant, Valerie demonstrated her psychokinetic powers by bending a fork, which was classic Uri Geller stuff. On another occasion, she reportedly provided Gordon Cooper with highly technical information about a possible failure of the space shuttle's cooling system. Now, that eventually happened. The space shuttle's cooling system failed in the way that she described it would. Now, for this, it's interesting in all these stories, you have the establishment of knowledge and authority. This is the moment for Cooper where he's like, oh, this woman's telling the truth. Ergo, everything she's saying must have some element of truth to it. Like this always happens in these stories, right? It doesn't matter what you're talking about, whether it's some kind of spirit possession where you're hearing some voice in your head and it knows all these details about something you did when you were 7 years old. It's like, oh, it knows this. It must be telling the truth. The same thing's happened to Gordon Cooper. He hears this from this woman and he's like, oh, she must be legit. Now, Cooper agrees to join this consortium. It's a startup known as Advanced Technology Group, and it's headquartered in Washington, D.C. He's introduced to other scientists and techie types working for the group. He's impressed by their credentials. One day in 1979, he's introduced to a middle-aged former rocket scientist who was the 1950s era contactee, Daniel Fry. And Daniel Fry is one of these guys who claimed that he went up aboard the saucers and he met the Venusians and the Saturnians and floated around in the mothership. He's involved. And at the time, Cooper's like, I don't know if I believe all that alien stuff that he's talking about, but he's got a scientific background, so I'll keep running with it. Anyway, during this meeting, this woman, Ransone, she proclaims that she's just suddenly receiving telepathic instructions that Daniel Fry is scheduled for another flying saucer ride. And she's like, oh, this time they're asking if you can come too, Mr. Cooper. And so he's like,
sure.
Amazing. I'm going to be on board a flying saucer. Well, let's go along with it. She instructs him to take along all these items for the trip. He's told to take a compass, a camera, infrared film. She's been instructed to drive him to this prearranged spot in the middle of nowhere in the desert in California. It's like, are we getting deja vu here?
But why is it that they, like, no matter how elaborate and different the story is, it always ends up in this same conclusion, like where they're being dragged to an isolated location with the promise of being given knowledge.
So, and that's where he's going to meet this UFO in the middle of nowhere. 2 weeks before they're meant to do this, this woman, Ransone, she shows up at his office and she's all agitated. She's all upset. She says that the saucer ride has been cancelled due to a disagreement between certain parties. And Cooper's really disappointed, but he's like, I don't know if I want to be involved with this anymore. So quite, intelligently, he steps away. And the advanced technology group fizzles out after that because they lost financial backing. They were defunct by 1980. And the reason I want to tell you this story is it's like, this is still going on today. Think of Tom DeLonge's outfit with Hal Puthoff.
I was just going to call it getting DeLonged, where it's like, no, we're definitely going to pick you up and fly you away in a flying saucer. Like, oh, no, next time, we're definitely going to do it.
These other guys claiming that they're using gay psionics to bring down UFOs.
That's right.
It's all the same shit. They're all hearing voices in their heads that are telling them to do this, and they're all convinced they're going to get this amazing technology from these advanced beings.
And they've all got bulging eyes like they've been exposed to some severe sudden decompression. And it's like, no, it's just these entities that are trying to escape your body.
The bulging eyes, yeah.
They do.
I wonder if this woman in the 1970s had the bulging eyes. And look, Puharich was involved with this. He was using people to channel these so-called extraterrestrial beings. So, look, the reason I mention this is this is still going on, and we have to use very good discernment to separate these cases from genuine UFO phenomenon, although there's a big overlap.
That's difficult, though.
Because this is, what I think this is spirits in people's heads.
Yeah, I think you're right.
This is not ETs. This is spirits in people's heads. It's the same thing that's been going on for hundreds of years, thousands of years, and they keep falling for it. These spirits pretend to be aliens. Now, that's not to say that all the UFO phenomenon is this, but a pretty big part of it is. A pretty big chunk of it is just entities convincing people that they're ETs and getting them to do this crazy stuff, forming these ridiculous companies to get advanced technology.
I mean, people criticize sometimes for falling back to that, but the reason why we so often fall back to that is because we've seen enough of these cases. And let's be honest, what's really happened since the 1950s to the whole ufological field? Terms change, types of craft change, encounters change. But you know what hasn't changed? Our understanding of it. We are no better now than we were 60, 70 years ago. We're really not. We don't know. We don't even know if they're ETs. We don't even know if it's real. Let's be honest. From like a major part of the population, if you go and talk about UFOs, yes, it's shifted a little bit, but most people will be like, I don't believe in that. Like, it's not about belief. It's about people having these experiences.
I mean, you could even argue that we're more malleable and more susceptible to the tactics of these entities than we were 80, 100 years ago, because we've lost a lot of our spiritual armor.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, in the past, you might find someone who's like, I don't trust this because it could be the devil, it could be demons. We don't have that anymore. We don't have that kind of mistrust
Well,
of these other beings.
not only that, in some ways, people are being channeled towards it because, people get upset when I say that, interest in religion is declining. But I'm sorry, in major religions, absolutely, it is declining. Across all religions, like not just some, like all religions have got to decline. But you know what is increasing? Things that could be considered to be a form of religion. So the science of, the religion of science and the dogma that's attached to that, the cult of climate change, like the cult of, and it's, it's like, and I'm not saying that all climate change is not real or anything like that, but you have like this dogma that is now in these things that people worship. And if you question it, you question their faith, they get offended. But it's because that mainstream traditional faith is now rejected and pushed away and laughed at. People are vulnerable. So what else do they seek out? They seek out like new age ways of going through, forms of ritual. So they'll start indulging in occult practices or indulging in, crystal activities, energy healing, which I'm not saying any of that is necessarily bad, but people aren't aware of the potential dangers that could be connected with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the discernment has actually gotten worse over time rather than better.
But also the UFO cult, right? You and I saw an image the other day, a few weeks ago, and we won't say what it was or where it was, but it was of some of these people in these groups that were all attending one of these left-handed Scorpio homosexual UFO summonings, and it was like big leaders in the field, and they're all.
We don't get invited to those anymore.
No, we don't. No, we're just projected now. Like, clearly not gay enough. But it's like we both looked at that and we're like, what the hell? They look like they're sitting in front of a sermon. Like they were, or the way that they're all kind of.
Oh, I know what you're talking about now.
I'm not going to say names, but it was about faith. It wasn't about like there was all these people. It really was about faith in the UAP, faith in the, and I was like, this is creepy.
The way they were sitting, it was like they were raising their hands to the heavens.
Yes,
but it wasn't. It wasn't to any religion. It was to the UFOs.
Yeah, to the UFOs.
Which has become a religion.
Which has become the religion.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So that's kind of a separate thing, though. And again, I wanted to focus on some of these strange, bogus job interviews, which is very different to hearing a voice in your head. It's like... Often,
it's very real.
Often these they're running into real individuals, which goes back to this idea that some of these entities have infiltrated human society. So let me tell you one of the earliest cases. So this is 1957. It's from Shane Kurz, this woman, Shane Kurz. She was abducted in 1968, so she has this famous abduction story. But a year prior to that encounter, she was at high school and she decided to go early one morning, and it was raining, so she had an umbrella. And as there's no one around because the weather's bad, she's heading towards the doors of the school, and she hears a male voice behind her call her first name. Hey, Shane, can I share your umbrella? She turns around and she's like, where did this guy come from? Because she thought she was alone in this car park. She turns around to see a man she doesn't recognize approaching her, and she describes him. He's about 5'4", light brown hair. But she said the most unusual thing about the guy is he had the Spock ears.
That's right.
He had the pointy ears. You know the story. Mm-hmm. His eyes as well were slightly slanted, like Asiatic eyes, but he wasn't Asian. His eyes were gray and seemed to have what she described as a magnetic quality. He wasn't wearing a coat, even though it was cold and it was raining really hard. And he had these weird corduroy pants on she'd never seen before, and a plaid shirt. Mm-hmm. One of the plaid shirt guys. He looks totally out of place. Like he's wearing the wrong fashions, the wrong clothing for that time of year. Like all of it's just off. And he's got pointy ears and weird eyes.
Who was it only recently where you were doing a report about, was it an abductee that like interacted with a being that had Spock ears?
Well, that was on the last show.
That was the last show, yeah.
Well, that was a fairy.
but what I'm saying is, right, the reason why I raise it is because what's happening, like we're talking about this stuff being so similar, but being different, right? But it's like people were interacting with fairies in the past that were leading them astray, leading them down the garden path.
Yeah.
You know, and like it's the same thing that's happening now, but then they've got little attributes that are consistent.
Well, this is interesting because she's about to get whisked away.
Right.
Because he asks her, well, the first thing she asks is, how do you know my name? How do you know my first name? He avoids the question and asks her what she's doing during her lunch hour. And she says, I usually play basketball or volleyball. He didn't seem to know what these were. He looks at her like, what? What is that? He then points to a nearby field and asks her if she'd like to take a ride during lunch because he has a white car parked there. Now, she can't see anything in the field. It's just a field. She politely declines the offer and tells him that it was nice meeting him. And after a few seconds, she turns around and he's completely vanished. He's completely gone. There's nowhere he could have gone. Now, she thought maybe I was hallucinating. Was this a ghost or something? But she quickly asked some of her friends if she had seen the guy. They had seen a guy, but he was like a cute high schooler, like some boy. He didn't have the pointy ears. He was wearing like the school uniform or something. It was a completely different guy that they saw. So this has all the earmarks of the later encounters, like the off-kilter dress, didn't know what volleyball was, like just all this stuff that's off, trying to lure them into a car.
Well, it's akin to the Men in Black phenomenon.
Yeah.
Not so much extraterrestrial. It's more like Men in Black, where they really are kind of trying to pass as humans.
And there's a bunch of these. So there's one from 1974, Florida housewife. Her name was Lydia Stalnaker. She had previously been abducted as a child 19 years earlier. So remember, in all these cases, these eyewitnesses are also alien abductees, they claim. She was driving on a road north of Jacksonville when she observed a bright light hovering over a wooded area nearby. It's about 9 p.m. at night, so she pulls off the road into a parking area, and she's just looking at this light, just wondering what the hell this is. While she's looking at it, another car pulls up next to her, and there's a man who gets out of his car, and he's watching the light with her. She describes him as being short, so he's less than 5'5". He's got a swarthy complexion, and she's got a vague feeling that she knows him from somewhere. He's like this recognition.
What's a swarthy complexion?
Like he's dark.
Right, olive-skinned.
It's like like olive
Italian
skin. Like the way Keel would describe the
Orientals.
The dark-skinned, swarthy Orientals with the long fingers.
You're right, because like Keel was, like even though they weren't Asiatic, but he referred to them as the Orientals because of the complexion, the eye shape. It was just consistent for the time.
When she asked if he could see the light, this is what he said. He said, yes, and they're right on time. Okay, weirdo. They watched the mysterious light descend to the ground behind some trees, and he basically said to her, a helicopter's crashed. He tried to get into her head that a helicopter had gone down. And he says to her, get into my car and we'll go see if they need assistance. And she's like, okay, we've got to help. So she gets in his car. And as they're driving towards the crash in the woods, she starts to feel strange, like she feels suffocated in the seat of the car. And he's like, I feel fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
Meanwhile, she's like,
the next thing she knows, it's 3 hours later, it's midnight, and they're driving back towards Jacksonville on another road. She had no memory of what had transpired during the 3 hours of missing time, but her head hurt and her stomach was nauseated. After this, like she eventually got home, got back to her car and got home. She started to have nightmares about the incident, and she ended up getting hypnotherapy by Art Winkler, hypnotherapist.
And what did she recall?
The usual abduction scenario, like metal table.
Yep.
But
when was this again? Sorry, this is the 70s?
72, I think.
Right. So one of the earliest forms of that kind of abduction, though.
Well, the thing was, this guy drove a car and she felt like she recognized him, and she asked around, and she discovered that he had a job in town. And she checked in with the former employer, and they told the story of this guy. They said, he just turned up one day from out of town just asking for a job. And so we gave him a job, but no one ever knew anything about him. No one knew a thing about the guy. And after this encounter, he just left. He quit his job and disappeared.
Strange.
Isn't it weird?
It's weird.
So Bud Hopkins had a bunch of these stories. There was one from Debbie Jordan. Again, around the same time period. This was a camping trip. This was in Kentucky's Rough River State Park in 1975.
Yeah, I recall this one.
She was with a friend. There was a pseudonym. The friend went by the name Nan, another girl. And she was with a family as well. Anyway, they're in the just camping trip, remote area of the park. And her friend Nan, they're staying up late. They're listening to the CB radio. And this message comes through on the CB radio, and it's from some young guys who want to meet up and have a party. And these two young girls are like, yeah, let's hook up with the boys. So after a while, she sees this, what looks like a small truck approaching their campsite. And three young guys approach them out of the darkness. And it was weird because There was one small guy who had like curly blonde hair and these strange magnetic eyes, and he did all the talking. There were two other guys who were taller but looked like twins, right?
Don't worry, these are my friends from Scandinavia.
Yeah, perfectly identical twins who just stood there and said nothing the whole time. They said it was like they were almost like his bodyguards, this other guy's bodyguards.
Either that or they're getting him to take them around so they can do their nefarious activities.
Well, yeah, these guys were thinner and just very strange. Anyway, the guy claimed they were all in a band. He never mentioned the name of the band, what they played never came up. Like they never mentioned any of this information. So Debbie and Nan sat around this campfire. They drank beer with these three weirdos until late into the night. And Debbie said she started to feel a strong attraction to this blonde guy because he was emanating like some warmth, some strange feeling. Anyway, eventually it got really late and this guy kissed her on the cheek and they departed. But afterwards they're like, what the hell was that? It was so strange. They never got the names of any of these boys, even though they were drinking with them for hours. The blonde guy who did all the talking had this weird charisma. The two other guys never said a word the entire time. And the vehicle they came in, she suddenly recalls it afterwards. She's like, hang on a second. This is a gravel road. And this vehicle...
Oh, yes, it didn't make any noise.
It didn't make any noise. The road was full of potholes and it just glided silently above the road.
Yeah, there was a case... Where was it? Where basically it was like, please come and check out my car. And it was like an egg on its side.
Yeah, right.
Like floating above the ground. Like, no, it's definitely a car.
They also said it didn't have any headlights. It just had these weird like LEDs going around the edges. And
there is a psi effect going, like there's a psi field or something which is being generated by this. Like it goes beyond it simply being a psyop and just trying to gauge the reactions of the participants. It really is that these people are in altered states. And like you can tell from the fact that she felt this, feeling coming, this warm feeling coming from him. It's like they're being mind controlled.
Well, she was abducted. She had an alien abduction experience 8 years after that. So again, they're always, these are abductee stories with these strange encounters on the periphery. There was another one from Terry Lovelace's book from 2020. You remember that one, Devil's Den? And he had a bunch of people send letters to him. One of them was from Dolores. She had an experience in 1968. She was a teenager hitchhiking from her home to a party in Long Beach in California. And she was picked up by what you just described, by this driver in this weird silver egg-shaped car. It had fins coming off it, like it looked absolutely bizarre. And it had this silver finish. The upholstery was all this glowing white material she'd never seen before.
Maybe that's the case I was referring to, but it's very weird. And there's more cases though.
It's brand new, not a speck of dust on it, which is always in these stories.
But like a slippery shiny. That's how like it feels weird.
And the driver, middle-aged guy, jeans, T-shirt, sunglasses, hair slicked back, and he has this kind of magnetism. And despite her gut feeling going, don't do this, she gets in the car.
Yeah, this psi field I referred to before, it kind of like it reduces your inhibitions. Where you go, this is not right. Like there's something that's not right here. But naturally you just go, no, I'm not going to get into a car with a strange guy in this weird saucer-shaped car.
Well, immediately she asks him, what's with the car? What make is this? What model is this? He diverts the question. He just says, oh, it's foreign. And all the...
It's a Citroen.
Well, as soon as she starts talking, it's a Citroen. No, you wouldn't know. It's a Citroen.
You'd have no idea.
Anyway, after she gets in the car and has this conversation with the guy, she immediately feels drugged.
Yeah.
Immediately, like, starts feeling sleepy, complete change of consciousness. Eventually, she falls asleep in the back seat of the car or the front seat of the car. It felt like she was asleep for seconds, and he just announces that they've arrived at the party. After she said goodbye to the driver, she gets out. She's still kind of drugged at this party. She ends up sleeping at the party. During the next week, when she's, back at work or whatever.
She didn't drink or eat anything though, did she?
No.
It's just the effect of...
But she missed a period when she was, after this, a couple of days after this. And she went to the doctor. No evidence of sexual assault, nothing like that. She hadn't been tampered with, like nothing like that had happened. She had pregnancy tests, all negative. But in the aftermath, she had this feeling like something had happened, and she never hitchhiked again. She always had this fear of hitchhiking after that.
Because something clearly did happen.
Yeah, she always felt that something had been wiped from her memory. Now, there's a bunch of cases from Bud Hopkins, that basically end up with the eyewitness being sexually assaulted, like raped in the story. And this is...
You mean like in an abduction setting, or?
Exactly the same scenario. Like they get taken into a car and told they're being... Like it's a very typical sexual assault scenario, but it's got the missing time, it's got being drugged. So it's difficult because you're not sure where to place these. Like, is it just a conventional crime?
Yeah, well, I mean, not to diminish these experiences, but is it that these people have just horrendously been sexually assaulted, and somehow it's like your memory of it is eradicated? No, like in fact, I was reading about this. This is something that Raymond Bayless and D. Scott Rogo referenced in regards to why people, like some people that have telephone calls from the dead, right? So what will happen is they'll get on a phone call and they'll have a roaring yarn and a yak with a deceased aunt who's been gone for 20 years. And it's only after they hang up the phone where they go, hang on a second, they're dead. Like it's like, but they forget in that time. And the argument that's put forward by, I think it was Bayless, it may have been Rogo, I think it was Bayless, was that, well, there was a friend of his who was working out in his yard one morning, and he received a phone call, and he goes and he picks up the phone, and it's just the authorities advising him, and quite coldly actually, that his fiancée had just been killed that morning. Oh. And the guy like had missing like at least 36 hours of missing time, maybe a little less, but around that, of missing time. He came to just wandering along a desert road hundreds of miles from his home. And it was because he'd gone into a fuge. Like the stress of that particular, like that was such a, and it would be such a traumatizing, stressful event that it put him into this state of fugue. So a sexual assault, I don't think would be that dissimilar to have that effect. So is it when people are saying, well, I got picked up in a weird car and there's some weird guy and I had missing time, is it that the brain is just latching on to like a popular culture thing? But then you're saying though that there's no evidence for it from a medical examination. So I don't know what to make of it.
The one I'm thinking of, I'm trying to remember the details. It's from Bud Hopkins, and the eyewitness was one of his abductees who told him this story. It occurred before the abductions. But it's basically a guy comes to this young girl and offers her a job. And he says it's great, it's great money, but you really want this job. And that's all she tells her about it. Gives her like a number to call, and like that's it. And I think for some reason, she's convinced that she needs to get this job. Like, it's totally out of character to get this job. She doesn't ask any details, like how much it pays or what am I going to be doing or anything like that. And the next day, she's like 17 or something, 16 or 17. The next day, this guy who's like middle-aged and has all those strange features I mentioned earlier turns up in his brand new like black Cadillac at her house and speaks.
How do they know her address?
Exactly. And speaks to her mother. And says to her mother, I'm here to pick up Susie for the job interview. I'm going to take her to the job interview. And the mother's like, okay, that sounds all right.
Because a mother wouldn't do that. You'd be like, well, who the hell are you? Where are you taking her? There's no way that's happening.
And from my memory of this story, which is probably in my notes in like a couple of minutes, but he takes her out to this like abandoned factory. There's nothing there. And he says, oh, your job is to have sex with me. And she's like, what are you talking about? There's no way I'm going to do that. Absolutely not. And this isn't like he doesn't force himself on her. He has this strange reaction where he's like, oh, okay. Like it's like outside of his programming and he doesn't quite know what to do. So he's like, okay, let's get back in the car. I'll take you home. It's so bizarre.
It is bizarre.
Like, this is the job
bizarre.
Is for you to have sex with me. So she gets back in the car and she's like all flustered. And on the way, he's like, I just have to stop at a friend's house. And he starts driving to the middle of nowhere. And
that's when your alarm bells would be going off.
She's freaking out, but there's still this, like you're calling it the psychic field. There's still this field of control where she can't really do anything about it. And he pulls up in this grassy field and he says, oh, I'm just here to visit my friend. I need to just get something from my friend's house.
There's no house.
She looks over at the house and she can see like a metal structure with windows, but it's kind of hidden by the long grass. And he walks into there, and that's the last thing she remembers. Then she's got like hours of missing time. She wakes up walking home or something, and she feels like she's been assaulted. She feels like it's
awful.
It's part of the whole abduction scenario because of the sexual interference that goes on.
Do you know what though? Is it always women? Like, is it like, are there men that have these sorts? Because I was just thinking, I was like, I don't actually think you hear this kind of stuff from.
The author of the book, Paul Meehan, has his own experience. And because I've got way too much, I'm going to tell you the story after the break.
Perfect.
I'm going to tell you, because I realize I've gotten to the end of this segment and I haven't told you any of the phony job interview stories.
Oh, we'll do it in plus. It's fine.
We'll do it in plus. There's a lot more coming up. There's also cases from the UK. I'll mention a couple from the UK. There's a fantastic one of these women that run an antique shop. They sell like stationery and stuff.
Trinkets and things.
They're both like the type that works in like an antique shop, like these middle-aged women.
The type.
And it's a Saturday and it's always dead on a Saturday afternoon. And they're just like chatting away, getting ready to close the store. No one around. No one on the streets at all. It's just dead. And then 13 of the strangest people you could ever imagine just bustle into their store. And these two women don't know what to do because everything about these individuals is totally uncanny valley. Like all of them seem like their clothes don't fit them. They've all got like weird wigs or something on,
Is their skin pale?
Makeup applied in a weird way. Yes, skin pale. They're all walking like they've just acquired their bodies.
Mm.
And these two women are so freaked out by the uncanniness of this experience, they just stand behind the counter like not knowing what to do, just waiting for these weirdos to leave. And eventually, like they're all working around, they said their accents kind of sounded like language, maybe English, but also they couldn't make it out. It was like some weird Swedish mixed with Inuit or something, like just some bizarre thing they'd never heard before. Like when you hear foreign languages, you're like, okay, I can kind of figure out
region,
where that's from. Like it sounds maybe Portuguese or something. Like you just figure it out. They had no idea. And these people walk around and like pick things up, look at them, pass it around, put it back. And then they all just walked out, except for one of them who looked more normal than the rest. She was this blonde woman, looked kind of Scandinavian.
Like she was their guide?
Maybe, right? She brings a single pencil to the counter and she places it on the counter and she stands there like awkwardly. And they're like, okay, that'll be 20p, thanks. And she like gets out her note and hands it over like a robot. It's like when you get your 5-year-old to pay for milk for the first time, like they're so scared, they don't know what to do. She hands over the note. The woman behind the counter gives her the pencil. She takes the pencil, puts it in her pocket. And then the woman gives her a receipt. The woman that works at the store gives her a receipt. And this blonde weirdo just stands there looking at it. Like,
she doesn't know what to do with
staring at this receipt, and then eventually goes and like gives it back to them, like grabs it and gives it back to them because she just doesn't understand what's going on.
I mean, you could go, well, if you're a foreigner and you don't understand the language and you just try, but you would know to take a receipt. Like a receipt is a pretty, ubiquitous kind of thing across the globe.
Yeah.
You wouldn't behave in such a weird, even if you couldn't speak it, you would just kind of indicate very quickly that, oh, no, I don't need it.
Then she was just like, gaga, blah, blah, and walked out of the store. So a bunch of stories like that. I'll tell you a couple after the break, but I really want to share Paul's personal experience. How often have we come across someone exploring these topics of something as obscure as phantom bogus job interviews, and the author has their own experience?
Commonly, I should have realized this a long time ago. It's because they're probably working through their own experience. And a way for a lot of people to do that is through writing.
That's right. Well, that's coming up on Plus. Head to mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. You get access to all the extensions we do on these shows every single Friday. Plus members also get, of course, an exclusive show every single Tuesday as well. Let me bring up the website. There it is. Sign up today, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. Plus members also get access to high quality versions of the audio version of the show, a totally ad-free version of the show, And if you sign up for our MU Max tier, you get access to our entire back catalog going back like 1,000 years. That's what it feels like anyway.
1,000-year MU. Oh, no, actually, no, I won't say that.
Don't say it. Don't say 1,000-year MU right. Check it out, mysteriousuniverse.org/plus. All the details are there. Help support your favorite show. That's a wrap for this free edition of MU. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're on Plus, stick around for the great stuff after the break. For everyone else, we'll catch you next week.